Oh, great turtle, please tell us, what fate awaits us? Oh, great crystal, shine some light into our dark future. Bless us with crops for our children, and bless us with riches for our elders. Oh, great planet, for what reasons do your crystals pierce the earth? Have we invoked your wrath somehow? Will the trembling of the land ever cease? Oh, great Terapagos, we hear your cry, so pray tell, where doth your home lie? We only hope to meet you, monster to man, eye to eye. Hi, I'm Dream. We've learned a lot about the underground of ancient Paldea, but we still don't know much about the surface. A lot of Paldean history has been lost to time, especially before the time of the Paldean Empire. We only have a few records from back then, including murals from 10,000 years ago depicting humans that used Cyclozar for transport. Considering our information from that period of time is already scarce, imagine how little we know about a time as old as 1 million years ago. But little is not nothing, now is it? One only has to look at Area Zero to understand there are hints of something greater behind the curtain, waiting to be revealed. Probably in Legends Paldea in like 15 years from now. But no need to wait that long. We have enough information to start making guesses about this lost history. Our first exposure to an ancient civilization is a certain entry from the Scarlet book you've probably already heard about, the Mysterious Plates. In this entry, Heath describes a plate that was found during his team's descent into Area Zero, inscribed with a strange symbol and made with a metal that not even modern science could identify. The Area Zero survey team couldn't manage to make a dent into the plate, nor figure out how the inscription on it was made. Admittedly, this is really strange. One of the things that Ryford mentions during her second history class is the following. I must mention that the civilizations of our ancestors were not as developed as ours is today. This puts Heath's findings in a really strange position. How is it possible that there exists a plate that defies modern science when the Paldean Empire was not particularly advanced either? And why would they bury it like they did? The answer must be that there was another group of people that carved this inscription. We'll get back to these plates later. I first want to talk about other evidence we have for another civilization existing before the Paldean Empire. If we look deeper into the Scarlet Book, we'll also come across this entry. Here they observe more strange symbols, and Heath questions whether they were left by explorers from the Paldean Empire or if they were older still. I believe the game is implying that these symbols were not from the Paldean Empire for multiple reasons. First of all, we know that not a single explorer from that time made it to the depths due to Area Zero's hostile nature. Not only that, but their motive to visit Area Zero was finding the secret treasure at the bottom to gain power against opposing regions. Nothing religious or ritualistic like what these symbols seem to imply. Whatever they mean, the style is clearly similar to the symbols of the plates, and it would be really weird if they were made by authors of completely different eras. As for what they mean, I think they have a lot to do with the plates, so we'll tackle both at the same time in a bit. The last big piece of evidence about this ancient civilization comes from the Pokédex. There are a lot of Pokédex entries that talk about ancient people or ancient Paldea. We saw Terapagos' normal entry in the previous video, where they described how it is thought that it lived in ancient Paldea. Now, while ancient is a pretty general term, this game uses it pretty sparingly. For example, Gimmighoul's Pokédex entry narrows down that it was born 1,500 years ago. Clearly, 1,500 years ago is not considered ancient to Pokemon then. We can safely assume that whatever is referred to as ancient in the game must refer to bygone times, like the time in which Terapagos freely roamed the earth. Let us talk about the Pokédex entry for Terapagos' stellar form. In this form, Terapagos resembles the world as the ancients saw it, and its terrestrial energy is abnormally amplified. This is the entry from Pokémon Scarlet. It very clearly refers to a group of people known as the Ancients. There's other really interesting entries in the Pokédex that refer to such people. Ancient people imagined that beneath the ground dwelt a gigantic Torterra. This is consistent with the fact that Terapagos lived in the Underdepths and implies that the ancient people knew about it. Ancient people believed that the pattern on Bronzor's back contained a mysterious power. In ages past, this Pokemon was revered as a bringer of rain. It was found buried in the ground. Interestingly, the pattern on Bronzor's back is that of a plant. This is because this evolution line is often associated with harvests. Previous games also associate them with an ancient civilization, in it being dug up at construction sites. Very similar to the mysterious plates we have, no? Even down to the fact they're made of metal. These Pokemon are thought to have been created by the science of an ancient and mysterious civilization. Its movements are powered by a mysterious energy. It has continued to move since ancient times, so its power may soon run out. The science of an ancient and mysterious civilization. Interesting, no? The ancients of Paldea, from what we know about the plates, seem to have materials beyond modern science, strangely consistent. Apparently, Cyclizar have been allowing people to write on its back since ancient times. Depictions of this have been found in 10,000-year-old murals. Cyclizar being used for transportation is clearly nothing new. While depictions of this are as recent as 10,000 years, we don't know how long this tradition has gone for, perhaps way more. Its shape is similar to a robot featured in a paranormal magazine article. The robot was said to have been created by an ancient civilization. While it is a paradox Pokemon, and we'll get to those in a later video of the series, it's very interesting to note how the idea of an ancient civilization with access to science is spread even within paranormal magazines in Paldea. It's not an unpopular theory even within the world of Pokemon. Yay, validation! Now it's your turn to validate me by subscribing. Needless to say, there are a lot of references to an ancient civilization in these games. Even Ryford, in the anime, mentions the fact that there existed another kingdom before the time of the Paldean Empire. And we can start putting together some pieces now that we know about their existence. First of all, we know this ancient civilization is most likely extremely old. The fact the plates they built were buried into Area Zero implies that they made them before the formation of the Great Crater. The plates had to have been a victim of one of the Cadence, which we know happened a long time ago. The legends they shared about an underground Torterra imply they knew about Terrapagos' influence on the region, but didn't know the exact species of Pokemon that inhabited the Underdepths. This means that they must have arrived at the region sometime after Terrapagos nearly went extinct, but before the Great Crater formed. That is to say, the period of time from 2 million years ago to 1 million years ago. Not exactly a small time frame, but it is a time frame. Due to Bronzor's entry, we know they were religious to some extent and participated in rituals, asking for rain for their harvest seasons, probably the same type of culture that we've seen in older human civilizations. But we also know they most likely had the ability to actually create Pokemon automatons to some extent, as Gallade in Golurk's Pokédex entries seem to imply. Very straightforward, right? Old civilization, religious, but with science that rivals or even surpasses modern science. Atlantis really does fit Paldea when you think about it like that. But there is one more aspect we've yet to unravel when it comes to this civilization. The answer to this mystery lies in the plates and the different symbols we find in Area Zero, which we now know they left. Looking at the inscriptions in the plate, we can quickly identify a couple of elements that stand out. The first of these is the map at the bottom right corner, which contains a few marked spots around the Great Crater and a cross inside it. As many people have pointed out, the marked spots match the locations of the towns and cities of Paldea. This is odd for a variety of reasons. How would the ancients be able to know the locations of cities that didn't even exist at the time? It's not only the cities though, the appearance of the Great Crater is already strange in itself. As we've mentioned, this plate had to have been made before the Great Crater was formed, and yet, here it is, in all its glory. The access to science that surpasses that of the present time, the knowledge of cities that didn't exist yet. There are many clues that seem to point to these ancients having knowledge of the future. This may sound a little crazy, but it's not actually the first time we've seen something like this in the games. If you remember correctly, during the way home, this is what AI Sada and AI Turo have to say about themselves. Humanity does not in fact possess the knowledge to develop such a sophisticated AI at present, but the crystals that make up the Zero Lab have made such a thing possible. They are also why I cannot leave this place. Not only that, but the crystal pool allows people to see memories of dead people. In the Indigo Disc DLC, we are literally able to do this and talk to the original Professor Sada and Professor Turo from a different timeline. As we talked about in the previous video, the terrestrial phenomenon can warp space and time, given that there is a large concentration of terrestrial energy. Because of this, it isn't outside the realm of possibility that the ancients used this to their advantage. Once the crystals started spreading, after Terrapagos absorbed terrestrial energy 2 million years ago, they used it for their own benefit. Science advanced at a quick pace, to the point they could make Pokemon automatons. They saw visions of a future and inscribed them in a mysterious, metallic played. And because of the Torterra entry and the Terapagos Stellar Form entry, we know they were aware that the influence of a Pokemon was at play, a Pokemon that showed them the world just as it was, a planet floating in space. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Stellar Form, which supposedly resembles the world as the ancients view it, only shows one hemisphere. After all, that is exactly what happens when you view a planet from space. Perhaps that's where the map of Paldea that they drew came from. A vision of a future Earth viewed from space. To the ancients, Terapagos could have been a messenger representing the will of the planet itself. When you realize that, a lot of the inscriptions start making sense. They were documenting these prophecies the crystals allowed them to see. I've waited to talk about the inscription found in the cave for a while now, because I didn't think it would make too much sense without sharing this theory first. I've already shared why I believe it was made by the ancients, but I haven't talked about what it means. A lot of people have lined up this symbol with Paldea's map and concluded that it points to the location of the 4 treasures of ruin in modern times. I used to believe this wasn't the case and that it was a reach, but I don't believe we have another explanation for the meaning of these circles, and honestly, the locations they point to are close enough for it to sound plausible and like it was the intended explanation. Plus, it would be strange if the treasures of ruin were the only thing from the main game that weren't represented in the symbols of the main cover. So again, I believe these symbols were just left by the ancients. They had a vision of something terrible that would happen to the region, the arrival of these 4 legendaries, and they may not have known the exact time when it would happen. So then this symbol is like an instruction, telling people where they should be sealed. Finally, there's these 2 triangles on the side of the mysterious blade, with 2 zeros at the side. The 2 triangles most likely reference the structure of Area 0, the upper part and the underdepths being represented by the 2 opposing triangles, and the point at which they meet, the one with the 2 zeros by the side, is referring to the point in which terrestrial energy is strongest. This interpretation of the zeros is mostly a hypothesis, but it's based around the concept of a kilometer zero, basically the point in a country from which distances are measured, considered to be the very center of the country. When you take this into account, the entire plate takes on a very clear meaning. It is a treasure map with an X that marks the spot in which terrestrial energy originates. So then, if they knew so much and they were so advanced, what happened to them? I want to remind people of something. Things made through the terrestrial phenomenon require an exposure to terra crystals to keep functioning, as is the case with terrestrialization and the AI professors. So then, what happens if, at some point, the power of the crystals weakens? We have evidence that something like this could have happened. Do remember how, in the history classes, there is no mention of the terrestrial phenomenon happening around Paldea at the time of the Paldean Empire. No prophecies, no impossibly advanced science, no strange Pokemon either. The only reason they had to explore the Great Crater was the possibility that it could have something to help them against other countries. In fact, Ryford mentions how it wasn't until 140 years ago that the first terrestrialized Pokemon were found. It seems as though, at some point, terrestrial energy went dormant again, or, at the very least, became much more scarce. The ancients must have panicked. They needed terrestrial energy, but it was becoming weaker and weaker as time passed. What would happen to their creations, to their science? Would they have to go back to their primitive ways? Luckily, they knew where the concentration of terrestrial energy was. They knew where they could find it. They were blind to how much they were relying on this energy, unbothered to consider if the unnatural acceleration of their culture would harm the ecosystem of Paldea or even their own people. So, perhaps they went after it. Perhaps they demanded more visions out of it, more knowledge, more crystals, and perhaps Terapagos' guardian responded in kind. The prophecy came true. In the middle of Paldea, there was now a giant crater.
Go on, adventurers. If you desire our treasure, make it all the way down and meet us.
We will never know what happened to them. Perhaps there were survivors, small indigenous tribes that lasted a long time, carrying tales of the old ancients and stories about how they rode on Cyclizar. But tales, much like Area Zero, erode and forget over time. Does Terapagos remember? Does anyone remember their story? Maybe they're just that. Stories doomed to repeat themselves in the future.